Yeah, the deal. Minnesota, whole world, whatever. YouTube, my friends, family, everybody. Recording these videos, just want to explain a few reasons why tomorrow, on Election Day, November 6th, 2012, I'm going to be voting no. Twice, but really, this one's about the gay marriage issue. You know, voting no on adding the prohibition of gay marriage to the state constitution of the state of Minnesota. You know, beyond the obvious reasons that adding something like that to a constitution is pretty antithetical to what a constitution is supposed to do, which is defend and uphold rights. It is, I mean, it's also beyond the context of what a constitution should entail, which is not necessarily hyper-specific rules and regulations. That's what legislation and laws are for, not so much constitutions, which are the foundations that laws should be based on. But I also have a lot of very personal reasons, which those of you that know me know a lot of why I feel the way I do about this, even though I'm straight and, you know, married to a woman and, you know, have no interest in marrying another man, you know, or anybody else for that matter. But, you know, it started a long time ago. I mean, like, obviously, all equal rights are important to me. Civil rights in general are important to me. This is the civil rights issue of my generation. You know, I'm not saying that racism and other forms of prejudice aren't still in existence and we need to stop working on those. We absolutely do need to continue working on those. And there absolutely is still racism and sexism and, you know, creedism or whatever, you know, perpetrating all forms of our society, you know, from, you know, institutionalized forms of it in places in the, you know, both in the North and South, as well as, you know, in just our daily lives, our appreciation of, you know, or not our appreciation of, but our, you know, interactions with our fellow, you know, citizens, our fellow human beings, you know. But that said, you know, right now the real key issue is a group of people that are really being attacked in a sense, not so much in more so in the fact that there's more of a sense to want to ban them getting any rights, any increase in rights, for no reason aside from intolerance. And that's wrong. It's wrong on every level. It's wrong on a million levels. And I have a lot of personal reasons for feeling this way. Obviously, I have relatives, close relatives, and I won't expose who they are, you know, for themselves, even though that they're out and open, but that are gay, and you know, been gay, you know, since they were aware of their sexuality, at least. And I don't want to live in a world where those people need to feel ashamed. Now, I don't think that gay marriage is necessarily going to alleviate the shame and the you know, difficulty for a lot of these men and women to come out. That said, you know, it's certainly not going to hurt. You know, the more we normalize our relationship with our fellow human beings on every level, including, you know, gays and on the issue of marriage, the more readily and more easily we'll be able to accept them as being equal members of our society, which right now they're clearly not. Because we're saying that you can have a relationship with someone, but you can't formalize that relationship in a way the state's regarded as being, you know, the highest form, you know, which is essentially just a state-sponsored version of partnership. It's just saying you're entering a contract with the state. You, your partner, the state of Minnesota, state of New York, wherever you live, essentially saying, we agree to be together, start a family, create a structure, and we'll share our selves accordingly. And should we decide to end this relationship, there's going to be more consequences that are, you know, deemed by the state to be more just and fair than if we were to just break up and when one person could clearly take advantage of the other, or vice versa, whatever. The personal reasons, though, that I really have to do it, I mean, it started when I was a kid. You know, I had a friend named Steen. Some of you knew him. Kid grew up around the block from me. You know, he was a African-American black kid, you know. He had a white, I thought it was his father, he had a white stepfather. And Steve moved away, I guess, when I was about 13. He moved out to Long Island. I'm from Queens. And I didn't really hear too much from him after that. I mean, you know, every so often, I think I slept over his house once when I was a kid after he moved out there. But I sort of lost touch with him. My friend Janelle, she maintained touch with him. She lived across the street from where I grew up. And I'd hear about what he was doing, you know, through her and, you know, through my mom or whatever. You know, just sort of understanding, you know, where he was and what he was doing. And I heard recently that he was in the Army. This was several years ago. And shortly after I started college in 1998, I got a phone call about his death, his murder. Apparently Steen had gone missing for several months. And they found his skull in, I believe, Alley Pond Park in Queens, Northeast Queens, in Douglaston. And his social security number or something was written on it. And, you know, it was a really horrible thing. And they went out to tell his family, and his father ended up committing suicide over it when the authorities came to his house, because he had apparently murdered him for being gay. What had happened was Steen was in the military. And with the whole don't ask, don't tell thing, I guess he was somehow exposed, and he was dishonorably discharged for his being gay. And, you know, so consequently his father, also a veteran, found out and was pretty dismayed about this. And I don't know enough about the specific circumstances. I don't know if anybody does, about what led one thing to another, but essentially he murdered Steen and, you know, disposed of his body. And that was right around the time Matthew Shepard, which is why a lot of people don't know that story about Steen. You know, and it was just, you know, it's absolutely horrible. Both cases. I mean, Matthew Shepard case obviously also affected a lot of us very deeply. I didn't know Matthew Shepard, though I did know Steen. You know, and then you couple that with the fact that, you know, I don't understand why or how anyone can sort of hate on another person's rights the way we seem to collectively want to discourage or separate or distinguish the differences between a gay relationship and a straight relationship needlessly. It doesn't matter if you don't understand it. Most people wouldn't understand my relationship or anybody else's relationship, man. Fucking people are weird. We're all fucking weird. Seriously. I'm a weird dude, man. A lot of my friends are weird. Does that mean that I have any less of a right to marry somebody who finds my weirdness attractive, or vice versa? No, of course not. In fact, if you tried to tell me I couldn't marry my wife, I'd fucking cut you. Seriously, I have a machete in the car? Fucking cut you. I don't give a shit. That's fucked up. Tell me I can't do that. Why not? There's no reason. There's no reason to stop two people who love each other regardless of their genders. And, you know, the idea of equating the two to bestiality, I mean, give me a fucking break. Obviously, you can't marry a cat. We're not talking about marrying different species. We're talking about two species marrying, two human beings marrying each other. No one's gonna marry a dog or a fucking goat. Can't marry a goat. They can't talk. They can't say I do. Give me a fucking break. There's not even a the correlation is confounding. I don't even understand how you can reach that conclusion. I don't. And it's despicable that they bring it up. You know, and here I've made calls on behalf of you know, marriage equality, and I've been working on it since I was back in New York. You know, and I'm a New Yorker. I live in Minnesota now. You know, and I fought really hard for it while I was in New York, and I was really discouraged and ashamed as a New Yorker when it first failed, and then very proud when it passed the year after a lot of the scumbags, you know, I mean, scumbags like here in Montserrat, who's a fucking scumbag. I mean, the guy slashed his girlfriend with a beer bottle, got kicked out of the state senate for it, but he voted against gay marriage on moral grounds. That's fucking, I mean, right there. I mean, that's just awful. But just to alleviate a few fears in Minnesota's case, no one's legalizing gay marriage with this amendment. Yeah, it doesn't legalize anything. It's still illegal. It's still perfectly legal. It simply doesn't constitutionally ban it. We did try banning something in the Constitution once before in the federal Constitution. It was liquor. Banned liquor. It didn't really work out well. We created Al Capone, you know, Myers Lansky, you know, a lot of the other famous gangsters from that era, and probably created really the network necessary to start the, you know, the drug and you know, other black market schemes that exist today, which were controlled by the mafia for a number of years and probably still are in a lot of places because of that amendment in the Constitution prohibiting liquor in every form. I mean, that's just ridiculous. It doesn't work when we ban things in the Constitution. We had to repeal that. I don't understand why we need to add it beyond anything else. It doesn't. The only statement it makes is one of hatred, one of loathing, one of saying you're not only not as good as me, but you're beneath me, and you always will be. You're distinct from me. To the argument that something like, well, I don't have a problem with it if they called it civil unions. Okay, I can respect that as long as we call all state marriages civil unions. I'm not talking about churches. No one's saying what church can marry. You can't make a church marry or not marry somebody else. Churches don't have to marry interracial couples if they don't want to. They don't. I mean, that's their right. They can. If I want to get married in a Catholic church, they may not let me if I'm marrying someone who's not Catholic, or if I tell them that I'm not a Catholic and I'm an atheist, and they don't like that. You know, and I refuse to, you know, conform to the rules of pre-K and all that shit, they don't have to marry me. Why should they? I'm not a congregant. There's no reason for them to. But the state's a different story. You know, the state marriage is very different from a religious marriage. If we call all state marriages civil unions and leave marriage in the distinction up to the churches so that you get married in a church, but your, marriage is really just a civil union, fine. But then everybody's got to have a civil union. That's the foundation, the civil, foundation for marriage, the actual contract that matters at the end of the day with as far as benefits go and the things that the people who are fighting for gay rights are, interested in. Those rights then all need to be the same for all of us. I think it's stupid to change the name to a civil union. You should just keep it as marriage and you can have a church make a distinction. I didn't get married in a church. Nobody religious married me. A judge married me. And then a friend married me. After I was married, because it was symbolic more than anything else. Just like it is in a church. I understand if you have, faith that conflicts with it. I don't think Jesus said anything about homosexuals or gays marrying in the Bible. It probably would have been a pretty foreign idea to him at the time, having 2 men or 2 women marry, because that just, that just didn't happen back then. That doesn't mean that it's okay. That that's, as times change and we progress as a society, we understand things that are important. We also fucking stoned people to death in Jesus' time, and had lots of slaves, and tremendous inequality, and women were certainly not equal in any way, shape, or form in society. Even most men weren't. People couldn't read. None of these things are things that we would say are okay today. We wouldn't be, so apathetic if it was about, our right to learn how to read and write. We agree that those are fundamental rights that we all have as a society. That each individual has the right to learn, to understand, to grasp language and achieve more knowledge and things like that. We get that. We also pretty much agree that stoning is fucked up. That we shouldn't stone people. You should throw rocks at fucking people till they die because they cheated on their spouse, or because you don't like them, or because, whatever reason. You just shouldn't fucking stone people, period. Like, it doesn't even matter what they did. You shouldn't stone people. We kind of agree on that. That's a big deal, because, equating things from 5,000 years ago in a book doesn't necessarily mean it's universal today. That's the nice thing about a constitution as opposed to a Bible, is a constitution is a much more fluid document. I don't need to explain the hypocrisy of the tolerances taught in the New Testament of the Bible alongside the intolerances preached by those that manipulate it. But if you do have a belief that disagrees with gays or gay lifestyle or gay marriage, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I can't. You're going to believe what you want to believe. That said, don't necessarily force those beliefs on someone else. You can still have those beliefs, and you could still even fight for those beliefs without having to have a ban for it in the state constitution. One that really only serves no function except to hurt people, to keep them separate and keep them below us, to distinguish them as a second-class citizen. A lot of people fought really hard to end that treatment as second-class citizens, and we've sort of always agreed with them, especially in the end. There was always fighting and resistance and hesitance. We've had to pass constitutional amendments actually defending these people's rights, such as a woman's right to vote, or a black's right to vote, or a Native American's right to vote, even an 18-year-old's right to vote, as universal suffrage, universal rights, and then even after that, we had to fight really hard as a society. We had to gain together and say, no, there's no such thing as separate but equal. If you're separate, you're not equal. That distinction alone separates the two and makes you not equal by default. We can agree on that as a society, and history judges those that disagreed with it and fought against it negatively. Rightfully so. They were wrong. It was the wrong thing to do, to fight for segregation. George Wallace was fucking wrong. He was wrong. It was the wrong thing to do. History shows us that now. While a lot of people may have agreed with him at the time, even a lot of the people who agreed with him then don't. I'm sure Strom Thurmond doesn't still, I know he's dead, but, even in his later days, as much of a fucking asshole as he still was, I'm sure he no longer agreed with the idea of segregation as being a legitimate means of equality. This is what this is about. I understand the severity may not seem as prevalent to many of us out there, especially those of us that don't know gays or aren't gay or haven't experienced it. That's because that fight's been going on in their community for quite a long time. Tell people who, used to go to nightclubs that were harassed and beaten by the police and arrested for being homosexuals prior to the Stonewall riots that they weren't, persecuted for being who they were. Or tell people that today when gay bashing happened. Tell it to Matthew Shepard or my friend Steen, who was murdered. Both of them. Horrifically. One by a member of his own family. Someone who was supposed to love him unconditionally. That hatred's still very real, and it's still very there, and it's there because of this distinction that we make between these two groups of people. And there's no reason to make them. We're all people. We all deserve these same rights and these same privileges, and I don't understand why anyone would want to vote yes on this amendment. I don't understand it. No matter what, I can't understand an argument that holds up. And tomorrow's a big day for a lot of people, and it's going to make a big statement. This country's going to see what Minnesota says, and they're going to look at it very strongly because Minnesota is a historically blue state. It's considered a progressive state. One that's always been very civilly engaged and, less apathetic than most. The big progressive state in the Midwest. More than anyone else. I don't know. Minneapolis was one of the dawn of the socialist movement in the early 20th century. Minneapolis and New York City were the only two places where socialists congregated initially. There's a history of left-wing motivation in Minnesota. If Minnesota votes yes tomorrow, it's going to make a really horrible statement to the rest of this country, as well as represent the state in a horrible way. Like I said, it's already illegal, which is wrong in my opinion. There's no reason to deprive someone of their rights constitutionally. Constitutionally distinguish them as being separate and not equal. That's horrible, and it's inexcusable. And history will not judge it favorably if they vote yes. And I understand I'm an outsider. I'm a New Yorker. We already passed it. I was there when they passed it. I was there when it was implemented, and it was amazing. I have a young son. He understands, on some level at least, as a 3-year-old, why voting no tomorrow is important to me and to those that I care about. We ask him, and he understands it's about the right to have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, as well as a mommy and a daddy. I was proud to teach him that because it's important that he makes that distinction from the beginning, that there is no distinction, that either are equally valid. And I hope that stays with him. And it's going to be hard for it to stay with him when the state around him, the state that's helping to raise him, votes yes and says, no, that's not true. We as the people say it's not true. Don't do that. Don't do that. Let's do the right thing tomorrow, everybody. Vote your conscience. Vote your conscience. But just remember what that conscience is saying. Remember what that vote means, not just for you and your family, but for all of us collectively. And remember, don't think that those rights can't be taken away from you one day. Don't think those rights can't be deprived of anybody, given the right circumstances. They can be. And they have been. Don't set that precedent now. Seriously. Do the right thing. Please, tomorrow, vote no.